Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Progress America Unfiltered. I'm Tyler, and I'm here today with Rhett and Natalie, and we're going to talk all things Pride. Yes, unfortunately, June and Pride Month is coming to an end, and while we had a lot to celebrate this month, we also have a lot to talk about and a lot to unpack. So with that said, I'm going to jump straight to Natalie to talk about kind of the state of affairs and the state of the union right now in the LGBTQ plus community. Natalie?
Honestly, the state of affairs are not giving right now. The Human Rights Campaign issued a state of emergency for queer people, and this is unprecedented. Things are concerning. What Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida with the Don't Say Gay law, anti drag legislation. It seems like there's a cultural shift towards homophobia that is incredibly concerning. And I think it's our responsibility as queer people to regain the narrative and change the conversation about the queer state of affairs happening in the country currently. I feel like right now, a lot of the conversation is hyper sensationalization of college sports, drag brunches, when what we really need to be talking about is the fact that in the United States today, trans people, especially Black trans women of color, are at risk of homicide for simply existing. This is not a safe environment for the queer community, and we need to regain the power from the GOP, who is currently dominating the national queer conversation.
Natalie, I think that's absolutely right. And this past year, I think, has highlighted so much. And I think that there's like a common narrative that people want to put in history textbooks about how we are all about progress in the United States of America. How, like, since the inception of this country, it's been progress, progress, progress. But that progress, of course, as we know, has always been fought and earned, and there's always been pushback on it. We talk a lot about corporate pride, and I know Tyler wants to hop into that issue today. But I want to start that conversation too by saying, like, like always seeing like the Target Pride section, seeing Pride signs go up in Starbucks to now knowing that some Target stores are pulling their Pride decor due to pushback. Like, this isn't even allyship to the point of them seeing it as profitable. These companies are getting to the point now of saying that being even pro Pride is not profitable for them. So it's like it's turning this whole chapter of getting like, okay, so now we can't even get the corporate Pride. Not saying that that did anything in terms of advocacy, but it's literally just shows that these corporations were never our friends to begin with. And like when it comes to actual advocacy, when we know what advocacy is actual resistance to things that come up against us, like people like Ron DeSantis, like people like Donald Trump, like the GOP as a whole, that are in lockstep to try to push us back in our progress. Like, we need people that are actually going to stand up and fight for what's right. And like that has always started by and for the queer community, often led by queer people of color in that movement. And so, yeah, it's just like a very important kind of state of affairs to recognize this. Like, we always think about kind of progress as like kind of like a point A to point B, but of course there's going to be pushback within that. And like progress is not something that like goes without being fought for, and like you have to fight to keep it once you earn it. And I think that's that stage that we are in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of want to synthesize 2 points that I heard from both of you. And so the first being that, Natalie, to touch on what you were saying, we're seeing all of this vitriol coming from the right now against LGBTQ rights, like the Ron DeSantis's, the Don't Say Gays, the Nashville drag bills, all of these things. But we need to understand, which we do understand, but I also we need to emphasize that these things are manufactured. These are manufactured fears and manufactured moral crises. These are not in response to actual threats. These are not in response to any actual actions done by the LGBTQ plus community. These are manufactured scare tactics by the right, in the same way that we've seen the right do it with race and critical race theory and crime and inflation and et cetera, et cetera. They are manufacturing fears to incite vitriolic hatred and violence from their base. And I think the violence is what's important. And again, what you touched on, Natalie, that trans people, visibly queer people, especially those of color, are at risk every day, just being themselves and living their lives. That is intentional. The fear of violence and the fear of life-threatening actions is intentional. And it's being intentionally pushed by the right. And that's why we're seeing places like Target pulling down their pride displays and pulling down their pride merch, because their employees fear for their lives, because the employees, who have no say in it either way, are the target of this hatred a lot of the time by, people who are fueled by this right-wing dogma. So I think it's really important to synthesize all of that. And it does lead into the reminder that at the end of the day, corporations are going to do what's profitable. There were years, and it's an interesting thing to say this, when we think about when I was growing up, in the 2008, don't say, or what was it, no hate campaign, where everybody taped their mouths to get people to stop saying gay as derogatory, and the Hillary Duff commercial, that is the most iconic thing ever. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you say? Knock it off. To, and the overwhelming, arch of acceptance, to now kind of a horseshoe theory of we got so quote unquote accepting that now people are freaking out at Budweiser for, having trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney and stuff. It's really interesting to see how quickly these things are swinging. And I think it's important to note that these things are not swinging naturally. This is not the normal state of affairs. This is very much manufactured fear, and it's responsive to the progress we've been making. And like Rhett said, we have to keep making progress. This doesn't mean we're going backwards. It's not a straight line. It is an up and down. And right now I feel like we're in a little bit of a downturn. But anyway, rant over. And Natalie, I want to pass it back to you.
You're not wrong. And this is something that Trixie Mattel, a very popular drag queen, was touching on this month, saying, if you look at the statistics, there are basically no instances of drag queens and pedophilic actions. This whole controversy is what you're saying has been manufactured by the GOP to instill hatred in their base, to bring out votes, because they don't have actual platform pieces that will do that. So instead, they have to rely on cheap tricks that are endangering queer people in the process.
Absolutely. But on the other end of that, we do have some advocates, and we do have some leaders on the left who are showing up for the LGBTQ plus community. And I heard from a little birdie that Rhett got pretty close to one of them. So Rhett, can you tell us who our special guest star of Pride Month is?
Okay, so I was sitting I went to the speaking event last Monday night for Speaker Pelosi here in San Francisco, my hometown that I'm so happy to represent every week on this show. But I was wearing this little Pride wristband that I got while I was phone banking with her office a few months ago, and it was just a rainbow flag. I wore it a few times on this show, love it so much. But her chief of staff hopped over to me and my partner that was sitting next to me and said, "Hey, do you two want to walk in the Pride Parade with us?" Of course, we had a longer conversation than that, but we were like, oh, yes. Oh, yes. So we walked in the Pride Parade with Speaker Pelosi. I got a new lock screen out of it, which I'll show you all right here. I got a lot of other photos too, including a selfie. I'll try to get them sent to our producers so we can put them on this screen. But really, this went from something where my boyfriend and I were thinking that we weren't going to go to the Pride Parade. We were thinking of just kind of hanging out locally. For a variety of reasons, but partly because, I think there's an actual, as you all were mentioning, the fear of violence, gun violence that we're looking at in the news, all these other things of violence that, of course, it's very important to look out for your personal safety when you're advocating for things. But also, at the same time, I think that queer resistance has always kind of been an adversity to the threats of violence that have always kind of existed, although they feel amplified, I would say, in recent times. But we're really proud to be able to show up and march in the parade with Speaker Pelosi. And as we were walking down Market Street here in San Francisco in this parade, my boyfriend and I were holding hands, and just seeing people from all over the world line the streets of San Francisco, it got me emotional in a way that was something that I've never experienced before. And you look out at the literal sea of people that was there in San Francisco supporting this message of just pride is love, pride is resistance, pushing for these things. And it's hard to not feel this kind of sense of just we're at kind of, as you all were mentioning, kind of like this place of pushback. But it's important to note that I think that we're such a strong and resilient community, and like the resilience of it has always been cornerstone to like why we've had this longevity. So it was just really cool. It was super impactful. Thanks for letting me talk about it. Yeah, but it was really incredible. I think that one other thing I wanted to mention, and like Natalie, we were talking a little bit about how we want like a do-over. We want to continue the Pride Month festivities. And you were mentioning like bringing it into July. That was something I noticed too ahead of Pride Month. Was I was in the Castro in San Francisco, which is the historically gay community there. And it was like a very common kind of conversation I was hearing about how this Pride Month was feeling kind of heavy with like all of the anti-LGBT plus legislation and movement that's going on in this country. And so, yeah, within that, I think, hey, we really got to continue the celebration. It's all the more reason to show up and show out.
Seriously. Pride Month 2.0 is about to be in full effect this July. And you're right, Rhett. The queer community is a very resilient community. We don't need the rainbow capitalism. We don't need other people. As human beings, we should be able to respect one another, even if you don't understand or necessarily agree with the lifestyle, even though that makes no sense at all. And there's literally gay dolphins. Like, if the dolphins can be gay, then we can be gay too. Literally.
That's making me laugh so hard. But I totally agree. And I think I've seen the jokes already all over TikTok. You know, I think the queer community in general, we're all preparing for when it's like, okay, it's July 1st, like Target, done. Budweiser, done. Like, you guys don't exist anymore. It's like, okay, now that gay shit is over.
Time to roll
like, you know, because we've seen it time and time again. We know what it happens. As a person of color, as a Black person, I know what happens from February 1st to February 28th, and then, or 29th on a special year. And then March 1st, it's like it never happened. Same thing happens every year with Pride. So I kind of love the idea of having a Pride 2.0. Maybe keeping this one corporate free, keeping it in our communities, still showing up for our communities, you know, donate in solidarity, look for some mutual aid, help some queer people in your neighborhood, talk to your queer cousin and see how they're doing. I don't know. There's so many ways that we can continue to celebrate Pride that does not have to, you know, I hate to say it, doesn't have to involve rainbow flags and sparkly outfits and going to the club. It can just be showing up for the queer people in your life. And I think that is what the work entails, and doing that 365, 247.
Tyler, I love what you said about donating. And I saw this thing on Instagram that was like, hey, how about we donate some of the profits or some of the money that we spend like on drinks at Pride festivities to actual mutual aid funds that like go directly to people impacted by these things. I think that's really important for sure. Like, giving directly to people during this time is so important. Yeah, Tyler, that was a really good point. So I think we'll definitely drop some places to donate into the description of this video. So let's keep up the good work. Let's keep rallying. Let's give cash, like not only showing up in our little sparkly outfits, but let's give cash as well where we can.
Support your local really drag queens. Yeah, like get out there, be a part of your community. Don't just celebrate the community in June. If you don't just talk about it, be about it. We'll see you the rest of the year at these awesome events that are happening year round and not just ending on June 30th. But that said, Natalie, Rhett, any last notes before we wrap this episode up and start our Pride 2.0 celebrations?
You're right. I feel like if people have $50 to spend on a ticket to the club on a Pride weekend, then you have $25 to donate to mutual aid. So let's keep up this solidarity. We have each other's backs. Our community is beautiful. Our love is resilient. It's natural and amazing. And not everyone gets to experience it, but that's just too bad for them. Happy Pride, everyone.
Absolutely. Love really is love, and it will always win over hate. And so don't let the fear get you down. Continue to celebrate your life. Be you. Joy is the best act of resistance. Thank you so much for joining us at Progress America Unfiltered, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.